So a lot going on, of course, in the U.S. and especially in Washington. Let's bring in a couple of our guests to talk about this. Brian Calfano, political reporter and professor of political science. He is at the University of Cincinnati and joins us today from Dallas, Texas. Thanks for joining us very much. Stephen Farnsworth teaches political science at the University of Mary, Washington. He joins us today from D.C. And Raynon Levine is a political science lecturer at the University of Toronto. Welcome, everybody.
Glad to be here.
Thanks. Another stirring day coming in political news out of the U.S. Brian, I'm going to start with you. Anthony Scaramucci on the job for 10 days. What's your indication? Was he pretty much asked to leave here?
You know, I think so, but I think we have to keep in mind that the president is actually a pretty big fan of professional wrestling. And one of the things that I think escapes all of us if we're not careful about it is this may be a work. This may end up being something where he and Scaramucci got together and said, look, I need somebody who can be a transitional figure in my White House. I need someone who can make everything look like I'm having to blame somebody for these decisions that are being made. You can fit that bill just fine, Anthony. And if you're willing to do this, I'm going to keep you around in some way as part of my kitchen cabinet. I think it's, again, important to remember this president has had more outside advisors potentially than any president since Andrew Jackson in the 1830s. I don't see any indication that Anthony Scaramucci is not going to continue to play that role on the outside, and that may be enough for him.
Okay, Stephen, let me ask you this question. Why bring in Anthony Scaramucci to head your communications department? We know he had that sort of tirade, which happened unexpectedly, we'll say. The president, of course, it was publicized. The president didn't like it, found it inappropriate. But why bring him in to head the communications department, pretty much knowing that Priebus is going to be out, you're going to bring in the general, if the two aren't going to work well together?
Well, this is an example, I think, of a presidency that really isn't thinking a move ahead. It just simply is reacting to the situation at the moment. I think that it was pretty clear that the deal that had been worked out, that where the Scaramucci would speak directly to the president, wasn't going to be successful in the long term, and Priebus then couldn't accept that over the longer term either. So within a week, Priebus is out. And then a few days later, Scaramucci is out because the new chief of staff won't accept this deal either. And I imagine we'll find out that one of the conditions of accepting the job as chief of staff by the general was that General Kelly would be able to either control Scaramucci or be able to send him packing. And so my guess here is that we're looking at a situation where you're just simply seeing presidential chaos that has marked this administration from day one. This is just the latest edition.
Okay, Raynon, let me ask you, were there just too many side deals made by Donald Trump here for any of this to work well?
You know, I'm not sure we know or we will ever know exactly what deals were made with whom. The bottom line is, I would totally agree with Professor Farnsworth. This is an administration that does not think strategically, does not think one step ahead. And so, you know, it could have been just bringing Scaramucci in, and then clearly, his first days in office, he clearly was unsuited for the role. And once that was quite clear, push came to shove, and he was shoved.
Okay, let's take a moment here and take a look back at the people the administration has lost in its quick 6 months in office. I'm going to bring up that graphic, and just as a reminder to the viewers who we're talking about, we have Sally Yates, of course, who was fired. Mike Flynn resigned under pressure, of course, national security advisor, now under investigation as part of the Russian meddling situation. James Comey of the FBI fired. Anthony Scaramucci newly out. Reince Priebus, quote unquote, pushed out, resigned. Depends on how you look at it. Steve Bannon is still there, but he's been demoted. And of course, Sean Spicer is still around the White House. He's officially resigned, but will be leaving in August. Brian, how do you characterize this with the president saying, nope, it's not chaos, it's business as usual?
Well, I think in his mind, it is business as usual. My colleagues were making the case that this is a presidency that's out of step with reality and not very organized. And I think overall that's true, but I don't know that it's the case that in every situation where you've got a shuffling of a staff member or you have someone fired in the way that Scaramucci was, this is just simply a matter of the White House not seeing two steps in front of itself. I think on some level you have to remember again that the president has a lot of contacts and a lot of friends. It is not out of the realm of possibility that he ends up saying to some people, look, I need you to help me out here and to do things for me that may be unorthodox and may look weird to people who are political watchers in the media, but I need this and I need you to help me do this. And I think there's no indication at this point that you would see Trump and Scaramucci split in terms of their personal relationship. And I think you're going to see more of this potentially down the road, where he brings in people in this interim sort of situation and has a shuffle that goes on and then blames it potentially on that person. But I don't know that it's, again, from a political standpoint, something that's entirely strange in Trump's mind. I think he thinks this is normal, and I think this is why you're going to see it continue.
The new White House normal. Okay, Stephen, let me ask you about the tirade, which we learned from Sarah Huckabee Sanders that the president thought was inappropriate, of course, when he spoke to the reporter and used a lot of swearing and criticism of Reince Priebus. Was it the tirade that mattered to the president, or was that used as an excuse to move Scaramucci out because the general was coming in?
Well, I do think the tirade showed a really poor understanding of how reporters and sources work in Washington. If you're going to talk like this, you want to talk off the record. And if you don't explicitly say it's off the record, it's not off the record, and the reporters are going to write about it. But I think ultimately, Donald Trump, if this is part of some larger plan, it is certainly not helping with his public approval ratings. The chaos that we see day by day really demonstrates that this administration, more than most, is having trouble getting its act together. Now, obviously, every president makes a few mistakes when they hire their original team. Many of the people who work on the campaign don't transition well to government. We know that, of course, across the history of presidencies. But what you do see with Donald Trump is an extraordinarily chaotic environment, and one that I would argue is really not in the long-term interests of the administration. The more chaos there is, the more difficulty the administration will have in trying to convince Congress that this is a ship that they want to get on. As you're already seeing, as the problems of this administration mount, the trouble that the administration has getting its legislation, even its appointments through Congress, intensifies. It's not a strategy for success, even if it does take attention away from Russia.
All right, let's talk about John Kelly coming in as chief of staff. And Renan, tell me whether you think he will be able to run a tighter ship and get them back on the line they want to be on.
Well, I think one of the difficulties all of us on this panel have in evaluating the president is that we're more used to the usual normal way of doing things. And it seems that this president seems to have learned management skills from George Steinbrenner, the longtime owner of the Yankees, who every couple weeks would occasionally berate one of his managers and then a week later fire him. And then, lo and behold, later on that season, hire that person back in. That list of names was missing people like Corey Lewandowski, his one-time campaign manager, who now, although he doesn't have an official title, has been brought back into the White House, right, after being fired about a year ago. So we're seeing this revolving door, and it's hard for us to exactly understand because my colleagues at the Rotman School of Business, I don't think they ever teach the Steinbrenner model of management. Yeah. But that's what Trump wants to do. So if the big question is, well, what will Kelly do? Well, that's going to be a big open question. That is a role, the chief of staff role, is usually a political role that's given to a top either sort of political soulmate or an astute Washington, D.C. actor, because that role is the gatekeeper. That's the person who decides, this is what we're going to do today. These are the people who get face time with the president, and with this president, that seems to be really important, because whoever seems to get face time seems to have a lot of influence over his decisions. Putting a former four-star general is very unusual, but if he's there with a mandate of saying, run this like a tight ship, yeah, maybe it'll work.
Brian, I can't see Donald Trump sitting down with John Kelly in the future and saying, sorry, it's not working out, you got to move on. I see General John Kelly as a man who will stick around and call some order and some discipline just because that's what he comes from.
Well, you might be right, and let's hope that it is the case, because as my colleagues are saying, this presidency really is a bit on a banana peel at this point. Even the Rasmussen poll, which tends to be very favorable to Republicans, is showing the president at under 40% approval. I think the thing with Kelly, though, you might not see him stick around if he gets upset with something that the president asks him to do. If there's a falling out, Kelly will be out the door. I think it's the sort of thing where Kelly is smart enough and has a long enough career in public service to realize his reputation is on the line here, too. So may be a few weeks of smooth sailing between he and the president. But just like with Jeff Sessions, if Kelly ends up doing something inadvertently or advertently that Trump doesn't like, we know this president is not above throwing his friends under the bus. Does John Kelly become another Jeff Sessions? It's an open question for another time. But I think it's an interesting possibility to keep our eyes on.
Well, especially if he made some promises to Kelly saying, if you come in, this is the powers that I will give you. If he takes any of those back, well, Kelly's going to need to make a decision. So far, though, Kelly seems to be very willing and able to go along with whatever the president has dropped on him in regards to immigration and other homeland security issues.
All right, I just want to get to Stephen and ask him one more question, and that is the idea of reputation. So moving out after 10 days as the director of communications, where do you go if you're Anthony Scaramucci? He's a self-made man, so he might not need to worry about working, but what does it do to your reputation to have a quick stint under the Trump administration? Stephen.
Well, I think that Donald Trump doesn't really enhance the reputation of anybody who's worked for him so far. I think that that's the reality here. But what you do is you go to the area that you're familiar with, that you're well-liked, well-respected in. And so I wouldn't be surprised if in a few weeks we see Scaramucci back on Fox News. We see him at work trying to make even more money at Wall Street. And this becomes an unpleasant 2-week stint, if you will, in Washington. I tend to think that that he's not going to be all that visible in politics all that soon. I mean, you can't exactly run for governor of New York, say, by saying, I spent 10 days, 11 days at the Trump White House, and look at what I got for my trouble.
Yeah, here's my address book and all of my contacts after 10 days in the White House. Brian Calfano, Raynon Levine, Stephen Farnsworth, thank you all for joining us today. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.